just hours before a crucial Grand Prix for the 2024 Formula One World Championship. A case arises that could have significant repercussions in the title chase. Following an agreement with the Federation, Red Bull will no longer be able to exploit the system that allowed it to adjust the ground clearance at the front of the central floor, considered a violation of the closed park regulations. This solution acted on a key parameter of ground effect Formula One cars, further complicating the situation at Red Bull, which was already struggling to resolve the balance issues of the RB20. In the narrative of the event, it has been generally stated that the Red Bull system allowed for changes in ground clearance even under closed park conditions. However, this expression is somewhat oversimplified, as it did not act on the ground clearance of the entire car, adjustable through the suspension. The area of interest is rather the T-tray, the most forward portion of the flat section in the center of the floor, whose attachment is located just beneath the cockpit. This part of the floor is subject to violent impacts against the asphalt, wearing down the resin layer of the plank, which according to regulations cannot wear down more than 1 millimeter during the race. Therefore, all Formula One cars are equipped with a small damper in that area, whose task is precisely to absorb impacts, preserving the integrity and thickness of the plank. By acting on it in the pits, teams can also deform the T-tray similarly to a trampoline, adjusting not the overall ground clearance, but only the local one. However, all of this must be done before the closed park regulations come into effect at the start of qualifying, as it involves a configuration change similar to those on the suspension. According to what has emerged, the system devised by Red Bull allowed it to circumvent this regulatory constraint, enabling a mechanic to adjust the damper from inside the cockpit without having to lie under the car to access the area from outside. Although the solution did not alter the ground clearance of the entire floor, but only that of the most advanced central part, the advantages were nonetheless significant. Ground effect Formula One cars are extremely sensitive to the distance between the floor and the ground, such that even 1 millimeter can make a difference. A telling example is from 2022 when the FIA was forced to issue a technical directive to prevent deformations of the central resin axis, namely the plank, which teams were trying to keep as close to the ground as possible without excessive wear. The main difficulty with the current cars lies in finding a compromise between qualifying and the race when different speeds and fuel loads completely change how the car interacts with the ground, with significant aerodynamic consequences. Hence, the need to choose an appropriate starting ground clearance for both situations. However, by circumventing the closed park constraints, Red Bull could lower the T-tray closer to the ground during the qualifying session, increasing the downforce generated without worrying about plank wear, given the few laps to be completed on Saturday. For the 300 kilometers of the Sunday race, it was enough to act on the damper to flex the leading edge of the floor, moving it away from the ground and limiting its wear. The direct advantage for the world champions was therefore mainly in terms of raw speed. It's difficult to estimate the gain, but considering that this year the average gap in qualifying between the top 4 teams is about 0.6, it's clear how even 1/10 can allow for a row gain on the starting grid. At that point in the race, there is also an indirect advantage, being able to race with fewer cars in front, reducing aerodynamic disturbance linked to dirty air, benefiting tire longevity. One might wonder why, once deemed irregular, the FIA did not impose a sanction. The difficulty for the regulatory body lies in gathering evidence that Red Bull has indeed exploited the solution in the past to violate the closed park regime, rather than for quick configuration changes during practice. The FIA's priority is thus to ensure that moving forward, the mechanism does not violate the regulations, also avoiding a penalty that would impact the image of both parties, as well as Formula One, with the championship still up for grabs. The case, however, complicates Red Bull's situation, which is already dealing with a tricky RB20 in need of corrections, especially on the eve of the notoriously demanding Austin weekend regarding floor wear. But who is the spy behind the report to the FIA? Finding such a well-hidden device cannot simply be the result of meticulous investigation. Someone must have reported its existence, as often happens in these exquisitely technical matters. The Federation does not have enough personnel to monitor everyone and must necessarily rely on team reports. Whether or not the device was used is now almost a secondary issue. The scandal has erupted, along with the increasingly deafening buzz surrounding the paddock. Unlike the flexible wings of McLaren, whose case was quickly extinguished with the promise of modifications to their structure, This time, the problem is much more serious. A repeated violation of the Parc Fermé rules cannot fail to lead to a penalty. The challenge is to prove, of course, that those from Milton Keynes actually played with the front bib height. According to various reports in the media, the position of the device and the maneuvers necessary to access it make it very unlikely that it could be handled without raising suspicions. This theory aligns with the explanations provided by Red Bull, which has quickly admitted to its existence. However, the question that everyone is asking right now is slightly more interesting. Who is the Federation's spy? Which team or which engineer might have noticed such a hidden device, inaccessible to prying eyes, and reported it to the FIA? One can easily get carried away in trying to answer this question. One thing is certain. Red Bull has experienced a real exodus of specialized technicians and engineers in recent months. Personnel have ended up in McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, and Aston Martin. It is logical to suspect that one of these individuals is the culprit behind the tip-off. Perhaps a new Papaya employee, ready to provide McLaren team principal Andrea Stella with the right weapon to avenge the wrong suffered in the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And who knows how many other secrets could emerge in the near future. A disastrous consequence of a Red Bull that is losing pieces, and perhaps even the loyalty of its employees. After all, as legendary car designer Adrian Newey hinted a few weeks ago, there are still many things that the grid has not discovered among the tricks of the Austrian side.